Good morning. I hope you are ready for a busy day. This is the 6th time we've held this event, and it's getting bigger every year. So this year we have over 500 registrants. Now, like most conferences, I'm hoping they won't all be here at the same time because there'll be nowhere to sit. During the day, if we are full, there is a live stream outside, just to the left by the staircase going up. If you want to catch something there. I just had a cataract operation the other day, and I don't need my glasses. So the proceedings will be live streamed and, in fact, videoed, and they will go on the Institute of Data Science website in a day or so. So you can, if you've forgotten something or didn't get a note, you can pass that up. I obviously have to start by thanking our sponsors. The tables are around. Without their help, we wouldn't be able to run this. And secondly, please visit the stands. We've got everything. We've got the City of Ottawa, we've got industry, local business, and the faculty. So all of these agencies have, in fact, sponsored this event today, and it's to their thanks that we are moving forward. The students at the end of the day, if there's students here, the industry sponsors will be around if you want to meet with them and you happen to have a CV with you or a small resume to meet, and also do that during the day. Our sponsors are always interested in finding hotshot data scientists, and of course we're the minefield for that. And that's really all I would like to say. I would just like to start off then the events today by introducing our president. That's Benoit Antoine Bacon. He was recently installed as our 15th president and vice chancellor. So, Monsieur le Président.
Thanks, John. Thank you very much, John. Good morning, everyone. Quoi? Bon matin, tout le monde. Ça va bien? Ça va bien. Great to see a full room so early in the morning. I want to start by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin people. Thank you for being here today on our beautiful campus on a beautiful, if somewhat cold day. We're very pleased, we're thrilled, in fact, to host the 6th edition of Day to Day at Carleton University. So important to live our life day to day. Yeah. I said to Rafiq I wouldn't use it for the podium, and then I did. Sorry, Rafiq. I'm sure. Every year the event grows in popularity, and we can see it this morning, the great visibility of the event. 550 people registered this year from humble beginnings 6 years ago. We're so proud to welcome external guests from academic institutions, governments, industry, of course, hospitals, in addition, of course, to our own faculty, staff, and students. It's a particular pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker, Anil Arora, the Chief Statistician of Canada and a great friend to Carleton. Welcome. It's great to have you on campus, as always. Big data is increasingly central to the way that we do business, but also to the way that we live our lives. Every day we're generating massive data sets from sensors and smartphones and social media. The volume and sophistication of that data keeps growing. It could be argued that we've gone from a world that didn't generate enough data to a world that generates too much. That could be argued. Extracting the usefulness out of that data is a challenge, especially to do so in a timely and relevant way. But new and powerful approaches to data analytics, deep learning, AI, are emerging every day. It's an exciting time for data scientists, isn't it? The demand for big data expertise is rising at a very rapid pace. Businesses and government are all looking for top data scientists. And at Carleton, we're addressing that skills shortage by developing courses and programs that fit that gap, so that our graduates are particularly well-trained in that crucial area. And I'll name only one out of many, our collaborative Masters in Data Science, which is offered to students from 12 different disciplines that face particular data science challenges. You would expect the science and engineering, but of course business, psychology, history, communications, and this is a truly multidisciplinary venture. We're obviously conducting lots of state-of-the-art transdisciplinary research in big data, working to solve real-world problems in business analytics, economics, sustainable energy, healthcare, autonomous vehicles, public safety, and much more. So I'll thank you once again for being here today. This is an important day. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. I hope that you'll enjoy the presentations, the panels, and obviously the discussions. As John was saying, I'm confident that these interactions will lead to new and exciting partnerships with our students and researchers, and that's very exciting. It's now my distinct pleasure to introduce Professor Frank Denny, the director of the Carleton Institute for Data Science. Frank.
Thank you very much. So welcome to Data Day 6.0. So my name is Frank Dehne. I'm the founding director of the Institute for Data Science. And I'm here to give a little bit of an update of what's been going on. And I'd like to actually go back about 5 years, where that's when we established the Institute for Data Science. And at that point, important catalyst for creating the Institute was IBM's collaboration with a generous grant and a memorandum of understanding that was signed at the time between the president of Carleton University and the president of IBM Canada to get the Institute started. And so during the last 5 years, the Institute has flourished and grown beyond expectations. So you see the number of people on Data Day is growing every year. At the core of our institute is the interdisciplinary master in data science that you just referred to. Actually, by now we have 14 programs. That's part of the update, and another one coming. So, it's really our specialty and our what distinguishes our data science program from others is that it's actually a collaboration between 14 departments across all campus, across all faculties. So I'll read them out. It's computer science, biology, biochemical engineering, business, cognitive science, digital media, economics, electrical computer engineering, geography, health science, history, IT, psychology, public affairs, public administrations, and soon physics as well. So as you can see, it's a wide spectrum, not just across the technical, but particularly also the non-technical areas, because that's really important for data science, to have domain knowledge and technical knowledge together. So students from all these disciplines, they study together in this program. That's the main thing. So a computer scientist should learn how to work with a business person, and somebody in business is supposed to learn how to work with a computer scientist, right? So for example, we have joint projects between them, a course where they all sit together and do these projects, and some of these projects you see here. As I just said, it could be computer science students working with a business student on where the business student brings the business case and the data, and the computer science student brings the technical knowledge to do this. Or it could be a biology student with an IT student, right, solving some computational biochemistry problem. Or it could be an IT student with a geography student working on climate change. All these kind of projects, and you'll see some presented out there. So as I just said, like, this wide interdisciplinarity is unique in Canada, and our graduates, they're really sought after. So there's a whole bunch of companies here today, actually, trying to interview some of them. And that's part of what Data Day is all about. The enrollment in this program has grown very quickly. Over 2 years, in the first 2 years already, we hit our first enrollment target of 80 master students. So that's a large number for a graduate program. And within the next year, we plan to add another 50% to go to 120 graduate students in our program. In addition, we will soon have a PhD in data science that's going through the pipe and will be open soon. Over the past few years, we've also done a lot of hiring of faculty members. We hired 5 faculty members for the Institute who are full-time in the Institute working on data science. So we're now 7 full-time faculty in the Institute, plus all over campus we have about 60 faculty members who work with us on all these different programs and all these different projects. Last summer, our institute finally moved into its own designated space. So we're also now building labs for our students. It was all distributed all over the place so far. So that's also a great improvement. So it's a very exciting time for data science, as you all know. And that's also, as we can see, all this interest we have here. And we really appreciate all of you coming here. And you've seen the program, so it will be panels across a wide range of different topics, technical and non-technical, but we will start with our keynote lecture. So it is my big pleasure to announce Mr. Arora, who is the Chief Statistician of Canada. So Mr. Arora has a long and distinguished career in the public service. So he joined Statistics Canada in 1988, and he actually very quickly became responsible and Director General for the Census, for example, in 2006. He was also Assistant Deputy Minister at Natural Resources Canada and at Health Canada. And now since 2016, you're the Chief Statistician of Canada. So without further ado, thanks a lot. Thank you for your presentation.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Monsieur le Président. Merci. Congratulations to all of you, Professor Dene, John, others. What a great venue, what a great occasion to really put some light on an issue that is so topical and becoming so important for all of us. So these are truly exciting times in the world of data and artificial intelligence. As you all know, excellent quality data and grounded in evidence are critical factors in a democracy that is there to serve its people. And for a data-driven society, there are compelling reasons to maintain and even enhance our ability to describe ourselves with data and to do so accurately in an unbiased, in a transparent, and an objective manner. It is no secret, then, that the pace of change has accelerated, that our economy and society are being buffeted by forces at a faster than ever before pace, be it external shocks to the economy or new addictions that are afflicting our health of our Canadians. These all require data to illuminate the individual and collective decision-making needed to address these and countless other issues that our society faces today. And when we face the following fundamental question, will we operate in the dark, or will decisions be made in the clear light of evidence grounded in good facts? And so the challenge to doing the latter, I would argue, have never been greater, as are the opportunities for paralleling the accelerating pace of social and economic development has been a revolution in data and the techniques that are used to process them, that in effect provide the key, a Rosetta Stone, for keeping up and even prevailing. Indeed, new technological realities are changing both the way people consume information and their increasing appetite for it. Data are more and more ubiquitous. As you know, sensors are in our smartphones, in our factories, in our workplaces, on our websites, and are generating data at amazing rates. Each of us in this room likely carries a smartphone that is generating an increasingly rich data or a digital trail. Our digital lives are, in effect, generating a more and more detailed portrait that, if captured, gathered, and harnessed, could contain the key to telling us who we are, and perhaps even more importantly, predict what we're about to be, or what we're even about to do. Big data companies hope to get so good at knowing our needs and wants that they correctly predict them before we even formulate them. Think about what instinct means in that case. Big data and its new processing methods, most notably the predictive abilities of artificial intelligence or AI, promise futuristic possibilities that were once only the realm of science fiction. Economic productivity and economic or commercial ease, seemingly miraculous diagnoses and cures, etc. But first, let's do a bit of a reality check. Data, or more precisely their interpretations, are not equally trustworthy. There may be bias, perhaps unintentionally, perhaps not. Not to say manipulated. The big data companies have resources that, in fact, dwarf those of a modern chief statistician. If they were to set their minds to it, they could mine their huge data holdings for insights into the economy and produce alternate measures of, say, economic growth, or inflation, or unemployment, or even the health of Canadians. Who could pass judgment on their accuracy? Impartiality. More darkly sometimes, social media platforms have demonstrated that disinformation can get as much traction as facts, in fact, sometimes even more. These platforms demonstrate that the power and reach of a single producer can match or even surpass that of robust and reputable research organizations. But, believe it or not, things can even get darker. The thrilling rise of high-profile AI use cases that power self-driving cars, sophisticated medical diagnostics, while providing ample demonstration of the apparently superhuman judgment that machines can now employ, have also resurrected old fears of social dislocation caused by the mass automation of certain professions and attendant job losses, or the outright takeover of society by a super-intelligent machine. Remember Will Smith in Asimov's I, Robot? Or Kubrick's classier 2001, A Space Odyssey? The common thread in both films is that decision-making power and autonomy given an AI-enabled computer program that leads to tyranny and disaster. But more on this later. Let's turn to our main thread. In an open, transparent, free society, the bedrock of social cohesion must be trust. And so as our society digitizes, so must there be trusted data and trust in data. In the absence of trusted, reliable, and recognized sources of quality information, people may in fact base their actions on sources of information that could be erroneous, could be flawed or biased, and that can create an inaccurate view of reality. When that happens, decisions are distorted, and we risk losing the common ground between all of us. And we end up disagreeing about facts, which in turn, as you know, causes division. And this means that we need trusted players accessing data through legitimate means, using trusted methods that meet recognized high standards, working in verifiably open, transparent ways. Good quality data provide the factual basis needed for Canadian private citizens, academics, business people, and governments to effectively navigate the world today and in an increasingly complex and interrelated future. And so I was so glad to see 14, potentially more, areas coming together to actually tackle what are really complex issues. So what is the role of AI in producing good quality data and information? AI is inextricably tied to big data. In fact, I would go so far as to say that without AI, that there would likely be no big data. The phenomena, that is. It has become common to say that we are in a big data revolution. It's worth looking at what this means. Dig into it a little bit deeper. So in this conversation, some behave as if the idea of letting a computer program make important life or death decisions was something new. Well, as we all know, it isn't. Computers already control our elevators. You trust it to take you up 20, 30 floors. To land planes that we fly in. And these have been going on very reliably, I would argue, for a pretty long time. So what's actually new? A subtle and sometimes not so subtle shifting of the boundaries of control that we are willing to grant our machines. And to explain this, we need to point to three elements, and they all have to do with scale. Indeed, in this story, scale is the great enabler, the almighty zeros at the end of a number. So firstly, the scale of data, or rather, how big it's become. The volume, variety, and velocity of data are unparalleled and growing exponentially or logarithmically in some cases. Estimates outbid one another to illustrate this claim. By one estimation, the world's data holdings are doubling almost every 2 years. Some of it is due to the rampant use of societal media. Some of it is due to sensors attendant to industrial and scientific activity. As you know, every time a modern jetliner crosses the Atlantic, hundreds of terabytes of data are generated by thousands of sensors spread across the aircraft. A true digital exhaust. Secondly, the scale of computing power. Thanks to the cloud, processing and storage are rented from a few big providers instead of owned by individual users. And they have, as a result, become abundant and cheap. Processing capacity that until just very recently was the exclusive domain of a select few supercomputer-equipped facilities are now, in fact, be able to be purchased with a few clicks for comparatively modest amounts. And thirdly, the scale of sharing of open source code, including the easy sharing of powerful machine learning and deep learning algorithms. The rise of GitHub and other code sharing sites has produced a crowdsourcing of AI that is absolutely unparalleled. Rich libraries of reliable code are being added and made freely available on a daily basis. That means that a modern data scientist has at his or her fingertips a sum total of coding know-how that not unlike that created by Wikipedia, for example, in the sphere of general knowledge. An increased use and tweaking and refining of AI algorithms by the growing ranks of data scientists creates a virtuous circle that only beckons for further and future improvements. Several examples, as you know, are now famous. The identification of cats on the web, that's how it all started. The steering of self-driving cars, the correct diagnosis of cancers from CAT scans, victory at the game of Go. All of these rely on innovative algorithms, some using reinforced learning, some deep learning. Driving off outsized data sets being processed on supercomputer-like platforms. Large-scale data, computing power, and AI algorithms feed off and mutually reinforce one another. The bigger the training set and the faster that it can be processed, the more effective the predictions of the AI algorithms. So for example, millions of photos of stop signs processed at supercomputer speeds can now be used to train an algorithm to stop a self-driving car. Stop signs in the sunlight, stop signs at night, stop signs partially hidden at all angles. More stop signs than all of us in this room will ever see in our combined lifetimes. So much so that the self-driving car can now recognize stop signs more accurately than any human driver ever will. One can debate the relative importance of each of the three ingredients, but for me, data still remains king. And the bigger, the better. Why? Well, at this point in time at least, data is the rarest and most difficult to obtain. Computing power can be purchased, and AI modeling talent can be hired. But data, especially high-sensitive, personal data, cannot be obtained so straightforwardly. In fact, harvesting it is the basis of most big data companies' entire business plans. Some will say that it is not the mere quantity of data that matters. True enough, but the best scenario is to have quantities of quality data. For example, it is well understood that the car company that can acquire the largest number of miles of driving data will have the upper hand in the development of safe self-driving cars. In this sense, Tesla is just as much a data company as it is a car company, as each of us, or as each of its vehicles is continuously streaming back masses of driving data. The interplay between data, computing power, and AI algorithms, all at scale, mean that the border between the possible and the impossible has now shifted outward, and in some cases quite dramatically. There are more and more instances of where human judgment was once needed that can now be replaced by computer code that has an AI prediction model at its very core. And the predictions made by these AI models outperform those made by humans, and in many cases, dramatically so. Applications of AI, as you all know, are spreading and are set to become endemic, leaving virtually no part of our economy and our society untouched. Like the steam engine and electricity before it, AI is already being likened to a general-purpose technology, which dramatically and drastically alters society through their impact on pre-existing economic and social structures. Wherever quantities of clean, unbiased data can be gathered, it's a safe bet that some AI application is not far behind. The advent of the Internet of Things and the implementation of 5G networks will only serve to accelerate this process, allowing heretofore unthinkable masses of data to travel freely, creating opportunities for automating, for example, handing over to a computer more and more aspects of our everyday lives. So, I guess the natural question is, will this be a good thing? Consider this. Just as data can go bad, so can AI. First, the successful and wide applications of AI may trigger change that could very well become socially unsettling, not to say positively dystopian. We think we are by now accustomed to change, but humans need some stability. How will an older generation fare when it literally cannot recognize itself in the morphing world the young inhabit? And how connected will our generations be as the rate of change accelerates? Is there a point at which the social fabric becomes too stretched? Lest I sound too abstract, let me point to some concrete examples. The everyday world of work. As tasks are automated, it is widely expected that many jobs will be transformed and may, in fact, entirely disappear. AI applied to diagnostic ills will reduce the ranks of medical staff. AI in self-driving trucks and cars will potentially spell the end of work for most truck and taxi drivers. Predictions abound, and they spare virtually no one. The lower-income professions will likely be hit the hardest. The need for large pools of data could potentially concentrate capital and stifle competition, leading to a potential further accumulation of wealth in the hands of a privileged few. In its more extreme version, some speculate that the mass automation caused by AI will create a huge unemployed and unemployable underclass. We don't know how humans will fare under these conditions. And finally, there are the darkest predictions, the attendant to the arrival of superintelligence, also known as a singularity, or general AI, or true AI, when machine capability finally surpasses that of humans with terrible consequences, as some of the movies have shown us. And while it is important to acknowledge long-term risks and without seeking to downplay any of them, it bears emphasizing that none of these risks has yet transpired, nor can reasonably be expected to, at least in the short term. And what is most useful at this point is to focus on challenges that we face each and every day with AI. So leaving aside intentional malfeasance, AI can go wrong for two fundamental reasons. Firstly, faulty data, and secondly, faulty assumptions. A training data set that doesn't include stop signs in winter landscapes, for example, will not train a self-driving car to stop well in our wonderful, never-ending, I would argue, snowy and wintry conditions. An AI model that has not been verified and peer-reviewed may have inherent computational biases that may, in fact, skew results. Fortunately, we already have mechanisms to handle situations like this and reduce the likelihood of failures. An important part of the solution to this, in my opinion, is testing, testing, and even more testing. Before a driverless car is let loose on the road, it goes through rigorous and prolonged testing. At least I hope it does. Does it crash? And when it does, we need to find out why. And if so, as I said, is the AI model inadequate because it is poorly specified? Or are the data missing important elements? For example, all the photos that were used to train the model taken in southern climates. Standards will help us here as well. Standards for AI model building, yes, but also for the products and services whose performances are being enhanced and in which the AI models are embedded. For example, there's no reason why a self-driving car's performance in acceleration, braking, turning, obstacle avoidance should not meet or in fact exceed the standards of regular human-driven cars. Then there are the ethical dilemmas compellingly illustrated in the film, as you know, I, Robot, Will Smith, when faced with the decision to either save its occupants or sacrifice those outside. Which will the self-driving car choose? Here's a concrete example. Given a choice between a 50% probability of colliding with, let's say, a young mother with children, or 100% certainty of killing the sole occupant by driving off a cliff, what will the AI choose? Make no mistake, handing the job of driving to an autonomous vehicle also means handing it these sorts of decisions. But what would a human driver do in comparison? More pointedly, perhaps, what would you do? So, the fact death rates overall will fall dramatically, as claimed, as self-driving cars become more widespread, seems a small consolation in this case, and does not entirely allay our individual unease. And so, we are in a bit of a tricky situation, which I will characterize in the following way. A part of us is, quite frankly, excited by the benefits of AI applied to big data and wants us to continue, while another part of us would say, maybe we should press the pause button and take a little bit of time to think things through. While there are compelling reasons to press pause, we in fact may not have that choice or that luxury. Why not? As Canadians, we're accustomed to being a small country in a big world, with only a limited ability to control the course of events. In AI, despite the outsized and pioneering work done by researchers like all of you in Canada, things are no different. In the race to develop and apply AI to gain advantage, the world is actually carved into two poles. One is very familiar to us, and is centered around the US, and includes Canada, the UK, and generally speaking, most European countries. The other, perhaps a little less familiar to us, but as in so much else, is making great strides. And of course, here I'm referring to China. As Canadians, we're already familiar with the large American companies which have captured such a large share of our lives. Whether measured by profits, revenues, or capitalization, they have propelled themselves in a few short years to the forefront of American and world economic might. But it is not just the big players. There is also an ever richer ecosystem of smaller players, some of which are here today, that have an important role to play in this new and emerging and evolving data ecosystem. The insights of a few entrepreneurs into how to collect and monetize data on the internet have in a few short years created giants that are quite literally transforming the way we communicate and interact, our culture, and in fact, our world. Companies like Facebook, Google, YouTube, LinkedIn, just to name a few, in exchange for free social media, web search, streaming, and professional network services have convinced us to part with often highly personal information to a degree that sometimes is surprising to someone like me, who leads an organization that has had privacy and the correct use of data as central and core values for now over a century. But that is the implicit bargain. On the one hand, our data, freely provided to us, powered by AI, have become engines of profit. In exchange, highly entertaining, some say addictive, and useful services. It's unavoidable. When something is free, you become the product. I suppose we can be grateful that the purposes to which data collected in this manner have been overwhelmingly commercial, and so relatively benign. But this has not always been the case. As noted earlier, data can also be used for more nefarious purposes, political manipulation, as we've seen. This raises important privacy, ethical, and moral concerns that must be dealt with. But let's save and leave that aside for the time being and reflect on one overwhelming fact. It is the very companies that have the largest data holdings that are working on the most leading edge AI and which have attracted the top talent to do it. Some of it from Toronto and Montreal. You see the ones from U of T's Jeffrey Hinton and his many students, Joshua Bengio at the University of Montreal, and of course, right here at home. Leading researchers are attracted to the largest data sets because these are the most fertile grounds for the pioneering AI work they are seeking to do. And once again, we return to the whole theme of scale. And it is this work that will develop and refine the artificial intelligence that will power innovation, productivity, and even military applications that could allow the nation that masters it first a distinct and comparative advantage. The mining of data that is highly personal has become big business, perhaps the biggest of all. Apps that track our locations, our purchases, our clicks, our personal preferences, our moods, all exist on different platforms, and sharing and linking is difficult or prescribed by legal limits. The most successful companies will fully leverage their own data holdings and infer what they can about the dimensions of the puzzle that are missing. It is a big and profitable game. But there is a country with very different legal standards that is once again playing the game at a potential even larger scale. Once again, I refer to China. Consider that China has more internet users than the US and Europe combined. The days when Chinese internet companies were typically copies of American companies are long gone. The Chinese Facebook or the Chinese Twitter are not forgotten. They've been replaced by confident and mature companies that have evolved their own unique business models that fit Chinese society. The Chinese have developed an alternate data and AI ecosystem centered around companies like Alibaba, Tencent, and Baidu. In particular, Tencent's WeChat app stands out. It is unique. WeChat has absorbed the functionalities of apps like Facebook, Uber, Expedia, Instagram, Skype, PayPal, Amazon, WebMD, and many, many more. It is possible without ever leaving WeChat to post pictures, book a taxi, make a hotel reservation, order a book, make a medical appointment, and finally, make all the necessary payments. The consequences of this on the data front are also unique because an app like WeChat has access to data that dwarfs in size those of many other companies. Not only the number of users, but the variety of actions breaks all previous records. While most companies have very deep but relatively narrow data holdings, WeChat has pioneered a data gathering business model that is both deep and varied. As a result, it can produce far more refined portraits of individuals, their movements, and their habits. These are the elusive quantities of quality data that I referred to, real transactional data. This means that a company like Tencent now has access to data holdings that will soon be on parallel with those of the big American companies, and given the legal, economic, and social dynamics in China, and the country's prospects for growth stand to grow even faster than anywhere else on this planet. Why does this matter? Simply put, the AI landscape is a highly competitive one with companies and even countries vying for supremacy. If AI is truly a general-purpose technology, then it follows that any country that takes a commanding lead in it will see its comparative economic and geopolitical clout enhanced, while those that do not will, other things being equal, lose ground. So, how are Canadians going to respond to the challenges of big data and AI. There is a race on to maximize the application of ever more sophisticated AI to ever bigger data sets. Societies that proactively assemble rich data ecosystems in ways they consider legitimate and can encourage the application of AI to them logically stand the best chance. Societies that don't will simply be at a self-imposed disadvantage. I believe we can carve out a truly Canadian way, one that places the values of an open democratic society that respects the privacy and preeminence of individual rights at its center if, firstly, we come to a consensus as a society on data, notably its privacy and security and its intended uses. In fact, the following questions come to mind just as a starting point. Who owns the data? Once given up, is it still yours? To what purpose should data be used? Should certain uses be prescribed? If so, which ones? How should data be guarded? Who should be doing the guarding? Government or a private sector firm? Are terms of use in apps sufficient? Or is some broader form of consumer protection in fact needed? Under what conditions should heretofore separate data files to be combined to richer and complete individual portraits, to help cure disease for commercial purposes, for national security? Secondly, we agree on safeguards and standards that should be built around the development of AI. Here are a few more examples of questions to consider. Who should determine if a model is in fact ready for implementation? Some forms of AI, notably deep learning models, offer little in the way of transparency, explainability, and interpretability. Well then, should these be used? Not used. Governments have a duty to explain the decisions they make. Should companies that use AI also be held to the same standard? Under which circumstances? Under what conditions should algorithms be put through an impact assessment of the kind recently developed by the federal government? How much oversight is too much oversight? This may come as a surprise to many Canadians, but Canada, thanks to groundbreaking research done by the likes, as I mentioned earlier, of Jeffrey Hinton and many others, many others, as I said in Canada, is a leader in AI and its applications. We can continue to lead, and this will happen if we get, as a country, our own data and our AI houses in order. To do so, we will have to come to some socially acceptable consensus on the thorniest ethical, security, and privacy-related issues. This is fundamentally an issue of stewardship and governance, areas where Statistics Canada has deep expertise. Our challenge can be seen as one of coming to a societal consensus on the acceptable collection, storage, uses, and disposal of data that maximizes informational outcomes to the greatest possible degree. You see, a highly digitized country like ours may at one point be data rich, but at the very same time, information poor. It may have huge data holdings, but in silos, inaccessible, unlinked, unleveraged, undocumented, unstandardized. Conversely, a country with comparatively little data may nevertheless be information rich if its data holdings, however small, are more fully leveraged because, in fact, they are connected, they're accessible, and linked together to maximize the predictive insights that can be derived from what is inherent in them, the locked insights. This is how a small country in a large world can punch above its weight on the international stage. Statistics Canada is leading in this by applying this approach to its own data holdings. AI is now part and parcel of data processing at Statistics Canada. On a larger scale, the Canadian Data Strategy plans to do the very same for the federal government and the federal public services data holdings. Though the challenge is a big one, it is one that I'm convinced will collectively rise to meet. And why do I think that? Firstly, because this is something that as Canadians, we're inherently good at doing, coming together, reconciling different viewpoints to build something better. And secondly, because of days like today, Carleton's Day, Day 6.0. Whether you are an academic, work in business, or are from government, you represent a part of civil society that can work collaboratively to push the envelope forward and create the very necessary conditions for success. We passed an inflection point several years ago when newly developed deep learning algorithms were successfully applied to the masses of data that were generated by smartphone apps and exploited primarily by private sector companies for relatively benign commercial purposes. There's another inflection point coming, the arrival of 5G and the connecting of the Internet of Things. Masses of data that will dwarf current data holdings will now be connected like never before and will form even richer data ecosystems, for which I think we're all running out of superlatives. Supercharged streaming, plus data on our homes, our refrigerators, sensors on highways, in factories, all connected. More than ever, Canadians, whether as business people, academics, governments, or as private citizens, will need trusted data to navigate an even more complex and interrelated world. And to have it, people like us assembled here today need to work together to create the rich, high-quality, socially sanctioned data and AI ecosystems that are needed and so vital to support it. Make no mistake, if our data stays in silos with no consensus about their use, we will not reach our potential. So with that, I'd like to express my most sincere gratitude for the leadership Carleton is showing by organizing today's Data Day 6.0. I wish you the best of luck in today's discussions, and I'd be happy to take a few questions should you have them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Anybody would like to ask some questions? Well, I mean, first of all, I wanted to thank you because your presentation is kind of wonderful introduction to the panels that we're going to have. Because we have 4 panels. One's going to be the future of big data. One is the research going on here. Then we're going to have AI for public good. And then at the end, we're going to have local startups. So it's really a wonderful presentation you gave to introduce us all to the challenges we're working to overcome. Yeah.
Oh, there's one. Would you mind using the microphone? I think then everybody can hear you. Yep. You are not a plant. You can mention that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about the amount of data collected by the private sector, as you were talking about, and the size of data collected by government. So in government, as mentioned, you have a lot of privacy concerns. Often the data is survey data in the case of Stats Canada, or tax data in the case of the organization I work for. But it's a lot less data compared to the data, the data that you're talking about. So I'm just wondering if you see an imbalance, maybe, or trends, or anything, any thoughts on that issue?
No, that's a good question. Well, clearly we have we have a mandate as a government to serve Canadians on a whole host of, whether it's policy or service delivery functions or regulatory types of functions. And so the data that we collect is inherently tied to our program delivery and our mandate. Our laws, give us the kinds of do's and don'ts and the kind of responsibility. And if you look at the data strategy that I worked on with the PCO and our CIO for the Government of Canada, essentially picks up on sort of 4 pillars. And one is, how do you use data responsibly as an asset? How do you have the appropriate governance around it? How do you actually have the skill sets that are going to be necessary? And the infrastructure that we require. And so absolutely, I think we should stay within sort of our mandate. What democracy gives us is this is the role that governments need to play. But clearly, we're not isolated. We work in partnership. It's not one of these frictional kinds of things. But we in fact do regulate with whether it's PIPEDA or with our Privacy Act. What are the conditions under which the private sector should collect and retain and dispose of information? The question is really, what are those intersection points, and what are the access controls around those? And we as a society, as I said, the questions that I laid out at the end. And I think those questions are becoming sharper and, in a sense, even a bit more urgent now with the advent of AI, and more importantly, its application on things that actually make the kinds of decisions for Canadians. And it is, in a sense, blurring a little bit of those lines. It's no longer who first comes with it, but it's the expertise, it's the richness of the data, and the responsible use that can actually bring us the kinds of insights. You see the kind of partnerships that we're part of with academia, with private sector, with the kind of frameworks around what insights are locked in there. And so I think it is. I think the future is really about partnerships. I'll argue that data won't be the issue, and it'll be really about accessing the data in responsible ways, and the kind of expertise and the framework that we want as a citizenry around those that will actually get out the real value. So thank you for your question. Hi, how are you?
Hi, great. Hi, Anil. Mary O'Keefe, a former colleague of Anil's when we were both in other roles. I wonder if you could speak a little more to that topic of talent. And as you know, there's a global shortage of talent, of people who really understand data science in great depth and also have a grounding in the subject matter. That I was found in government, that was the biggest challenge. And so that's one piece. And the second piece is, how can organizations which are working to serve the public good compete for talent against, the Facebooks and the YouTubes and the Apples of the world, because the competition is so intense?
You're absolutely right. One of the key constraints here is going to be the availability of the kind of expertise that we need, along with all the other frameworks that I talked about, the ethics and the values and so on that we want as a society. But that talent piece is going to be critical. And so the question is, are we going to rate each other for that talent and just see people just move up the salary chain at a pace that is dizzying, as we've done in the past, sort of opportunities like this as well, only to regret it later. So all we do is we just create a vortex, and it doesn't really increase the overall sort of capacity. All it does is just moves those that have certain talents really up the line. And so we should learn from the lessons of the tech booms and so on. When there's a shortage, what do we do and how do we do it? And I think the answer there is partnerships and collaborations and networks rather than, there'll be naturally those that, whose heads just stick up and are going to be in, greater demand. The second point so it's not really an answer other than to say, I think we need to have conversations about, how do we do this better? The second thing is that there's a real, not every kind of person has to be at the apex, if you like, of that talent continuum. There's a lot of work, as you know, the biggest sort of, draw on resources in AI is the cleansing of the data and the standardization of the data and the metadata that goes along with the data. That's what takes us, forever. You don't need potentially the same kind of talent, to do that work. We can train people, as there's disruption and as there are opportunities to take on those kinds of tasks. Get people earlier in their schooling and career familiar with sort of the basics, right, of things. So we can create a bit of an ecosystem that doesn't just take everybody up up that chain. So I think some partitioning, if you like, of the kinds of skill sets and talents that give people that opportunity to rise up the rungs, I think is going to be another, really important aspect. And lastly, I'll just say we do need to, appeal to the hearts and the minds of our future leaders to, take on jobs that are intricately more complex, policy jobs in the government, service delivery kinds of jobs, regulatory frameworks kinds of jobs. And it's not just about, who can make the buy button be clicked at an increasing frequency. So I think institutions like this and organizations have to, take on a much broader perspective about the importance that AI and data scientists will take in society, not just in the private sector. Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael Wolfson, formerly at StatCan. picking up on this imbalance that was mentioned before between the private sector and the public sector. The private sector has gobs more data, and as you said, used mostly benignly for commercial purposes, whereas for the National Statistical Office, the preoccupation has to be with being able to represent accurately the population of Canada. So there's a question of the bias in the data. You get these streams of point of sale data, for example, with barcodes and all that, but how does one make those useful from a national statistical perspective?
Excellent questions. Just two, we can get into a long conversation about this. The first one is, for an agency like ours, as the National Statistical Agency with a mandate to serve Canadians, access to those data sources is really key. So, if we only have access to sort of what we produce and, kind of put together through surveys or our own administrative sources, well, then we're limiting ourselves. Now, that access has to be with some conditions. We're not going to, put somebody out of business or impede commercial interests or anything of that nature. But for bringing the kinds of insights to Canadians about the interrelated nature of our economy, our environment, our society, access to other rich data sources, as we have had in the past, is going to be absolutely crucial. So it is really that interplay. So it is what we have, and we do share, I think, for research purposes and so on, the microdata. So we are equally creators of big data, and I think we should also equally, for the kind of mandate and purposes that we have as statistical agencies, should have access to data that exists out there. So hopefully that helps. We have time for one final question.
That's excellent. I was hoping to be the last. Pardon me, Chief. I'm sorry that I'm not actually a plant. I am Scott Bacon from Statistics Canada, but I just wanted to build on what you were saying a little bit. And I remember being in a lot of the student shoes at panels like this years ago, and I always found it very intimidating to sort of step up and ask these questions. I'm not sure this is the correct forum to sort of pick your brain, but I did want to invite all the students and other presenters here to our booth, which is just over there.
It's a shameless plug
to
here.
speak a little bit more about the projects that Anil was talking about, specifically about crowdsourcing, AI, open data. We have a number of project experts here that can talk more about the projects and exciting work that we're doing at StatsCan. So again, to all the students, we're hiring. So cheers.
I did not ask him to say that, honestly. But to build on that point, we have had and continue to have a very special relationship with Carleton under the leadership of Monsieur Bacon. And we've been working hard over the last little while, and I give a lot of credit to Richard and many of our colleagues at Statistics Canada to actually formalize and recognize that relationship of this partnership. And so today we're going to take a couple of minutes and actually sign a document that formalizes that partnership today. So with that, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're just signing off on an MOU between Carleton and Statistics Canada, a reaffirmation of our long-standing partnerships over the years, and also a certificate of partnership. That's a word we've heard a number of times already, and let's keep that one going. Photo op.
Great pleasure. Merci beaucoup à vous. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.